All aboard!
Jutting out into Lake Erie near Sandusky, Ohio, is a peninsula that was once covered with cedar trees, and so it became known as Cedar Point. Today, it is covered with roller coasters, but it is still known as Cedar Point. By the late 1950s, when it was purchased by George Roos, it was a well-established but not very prosperous amusement park. After a trip to California and a visit to Disneyland, Roos decided to update and redevelop the park into the Disneyland of the Midwest. As part of the plan, he wanted to build a steam railroad, but the board of directors balked at the idea. So, Roos eventually built and financed the railroad himself, paying Cedar Point a portion of ticket revenues to lease the railroad's right-of-way. The Cedar Point and Lake Erie opened in 1963 and quickly became one of the park's most popular rides, hauling 370,000 passengers during its first year of operation. It offered a 15-minute ride around a 2-mile loop of track that ran through what was left of the old cedar groves and lagoons that once characterized Cedar Point. Those are pretty much gone now. The steam-powered trains consisted of open-air coaches built on the trucks of retired Denver and Rio Grande Western narrow-gauge stock cars. The original roster featured 2 antique steam locomotives, Maudale and Albert. After spending nearly 3 decades hauling sugarcane on a plantation in Louisiana, the Maudale was retired and spent the next 30 years in storage. In 1961, she was purchased by George Roos and moved to Ohio to begin her new career. The handsome little 044T was built by the Baldwin Locomotive Works in 1902 using 1875 blueprints. In preparation for her new role as an amusement park engine, she was completely rebuilt, converted to a 244T oil burner, and dolled up with a wooden cow catcher and fancy paint job. The work was finished in 1963, just in time for the opening of the CP&LE. She ran at Cedar Point until 1992. In 1999, she went to Disneyland in trade for a larger engine, where she was rebuilt and is back in service as the Ward Kimball. In my experience, she rode like a Cadillac, but she was touchy to fire. Every time the throttle was closed, the pop valve would open. 2 hours of running Maudale led to 2 days trying to get your hearing back. Of course, we didn't have enough sense to wear earplugs in those days. Albert, the number 3, a 260 built by Davenport in 1910, came from another Louisiana sugar plantation by way of the Cherokee Wonderland Tourist Railroad in Cherokee, North Carolina. Albert arrived at Cedar Point in 1963, ready to run, and helped Maudale open the line. After nearly 30 years of operation on the CP&LE, Albert was retired and is now a static display. The number 22 was quickly added to the roster in 1963 to provide backup and extra train capacity as needed. A 1922 Vulcan-built 040T, number 22 was first owned by the Wayne Coal Company of Claybank, Ohio. After booming around the country for a few years, she ended up at Cedar Point, where she received some cosmetic treatment, including the removal of her saddle tanks and the addition of a tender, wooden cab, and cow catcher, before joining Maudale and Albert in service. In later years, a pony truck was added, and the 240, now known as the Myron K, is still in service on the CP&LE. Jenny K, a 1940 Porter 040T, worked all of her life in Paris, Arkansas as Acme Brick Company's number 5. Before going into service at Cedar Point in 1964, the number 5 received the same cosmetic treatment as given the number 22, and was then given the number 2 and the name Jenny K. Sometime after 1967, she also received a pony truck. Jenny K served the CP&LE for many years, but since the late 1980s has been on static display pending rebuilding. Finally, the Victoria arrived at Cedar Point in 1965. The youngest and largest operable engine on the roster, this Porter 040T was built in 1942 and worked at the Carbon Limestone Company in Hillsville, Pennsylvania until 1958. After a brief stint at Cherokee Wonderland, where it was named Victoria RI, the 040 was sold to Cedar Point and became CP&LE number 4. As of 1967, the only cosmetic upgrade she received was removal of the saddle tank and the addition of a wooden cow catcher and a box headlight, but she still had her original steel cab. Like the other 040s, the number 4 eventually received a wooden cab and a pony truck. It was renamed the George R in 1981 to honor CP&LE founder George Roos. While scouting around below the Mason-Dixon line for additional engines to add to his roster, George Roos discovered the perfect person to run his little railroad, Jack Foster. Jack went to running shays on a logging railroad in West Virginia when he was only 14 years old, or so he told us. Eventually, he hired on the Southern Railroad, where he worked variously as an engineer, as third-shift roundhouse foreman in Knoxville, and finally as road foreman of engines on the line through Manassas, Virginia. He was on that assignment when he suffered the heart attack that led to his early retirement. "Oh, I could have had one of them office jobs," he'd say, "but why would I want that?" He had great stories to tell, and the sound effects to go with them. Wish I had recorded some of those. Here's the engine house gang from the 1967 season. That's old Jack in the green work clothes. He always managed to look like an auto mechanic for some reason. The fellow second from the left in the white hat is George Robertson from New Jersey. George was a real foamer, way worse than me. Old Jack would say, That George, if I could figure some way to put him in 3 engines at once, I wouldn't need the rest of you boys. Save the company a lot of money." Not that George was better than we were, just that he would have been happy to spend all day every day running all 3 trains if he could have done it. Next to him is Tom. Don't remember his last name. He was just back from Vietnam then, where he had served as a door gunner in the helicopters. One day, as he was running the Albert down the long tangent towards Frontier Town, he started to throw a scoop of coal in the firebox when the engine lurched and threw him right out of the cab. He jumped up, grabbed the handrail on the 3rd or 4th car back, walked along the running boards, greeting everybody as he went, climbed over the tender, back into the cab, and shut it down just in time for Frontier Town. We were running with 1-man engine crews. Don't remember the name of the fella in the cab, but I do remember that he was the only one of us who could get the Maud L to steam right. That's me on the right end. Old Jack had great respect for us college types. He'd say to me, "Now, Cullis," he never could get my name right. "Now, Cullis," he'd say, "you've been college educated and all, I ain't going to tell you what to do, but if it was me, I believe I'd do it like this." Well, I darn well knew how I'd better do it. That red building in the background was the park employees' dorm. I think it was the old Cedars Hotel. But they wouldn't let the engineers stay there. I guess we were too dirty. Well, Mr. and Mrs. Jack had an apartment there. But they put us boys up in this big old ramshackle house across the tracks from the engine house, which was okay by us. One night after work, we did something with a pan full of mashed up fruit and some Jack Daniels. I forget what exactly. I think we stomped it into a mash and then drank it. Anyway, we showed up to work in a good mood the next morning, and when old Jack came in, we asked him if he had ever violated Rule G. He said, "Hell no, I never drank on the job. I came to work drunk. If I ever showed up sober, the fireman wouldn't go out with me." So we figured we were okay, but we didn't do it again. During the summer of 1967, I had the opportunity to run all these engines, but my favorites were the Albert and the Victoria. You can look for 2 more videos to follow this one. I might call them the Ghost of Albert Past and the Ghost of Victoria Past. Well, probably not, though.